Why flight attendants always wear scarves. The real reason. A flight attendant's scarf seems simple at first glance. Just a neat piece of fabric folded carefully at the neck, a little colour against a dark jacket. A polished detail passengers might notice for a second before finding their seat. But that small scarf carries a much deeper story. It reaches back to the rough early days of flying, to nurses in uniform, military discipline, airline glamour, cabin safety, and a time when people needed the crew to look calm before they could believe the airplane was safe. The story begins long before anyone used the words flight attendant, and long before an airplane cabin felt like the quiet, pressurized space passengers know today. In the earliest years of aviation, flying was not smooth or comfortable. It was noisy, cold, oily, and unpredictable. Engines rattled beside the pilot. Wind rushed over the body. Exhaust fumes, dust and oil were part of the experience. Flying was still closer to a daring experiment than an everyday journey. In those early open cockpits, pilots often wore scarves for practical reasons. The scarf protected the neck from wind and cold. It helped prevent rubbing and irritation as pilots turned their heads again and again, checking the sky, watching the horizon, looking for landmarks, and trying to keep control of machines that were still very new. The silk scarf later became romantic in old aviation photographs, but at first, it was not a costume. It was a tool. Over time, that image became part of aviation's identity. Leather jacket, goggles, gloves, and a scarf moving in the wind. It told people that flying belonged to a special world. Then commercial air travel began to grow, and airlines faced a different problem. The airplane might be safe enough to fly, but passengers still had to feel safe enough to board. The engines were loud, the cabins shook. The whole idea of leaving the ground still felt unnatural to many people. In 1930, Ellen Church, a registered nurse and licensed pilot, helped introduce the role of the airline stewardess. The early stewardess was not meant to look like a fashion model. She was meant to look capable, steady, and trained. Her uniform borrowed from nursing and military dress because passengers needed to see authority before they could relax. The first cabin crew uniforms were serious clothes. They were not soft, playful, or decorative. They were structured, dark, and formal. Many included wool jackets, matching skirts, caps, capes, and carefully controlled details that made the crew look organized and professional. The message was clear before the attendant ever spoke. Someone responsible is here. At that stage, the scarf had not yet become the universal symbol of cabin crew style. Early stewardesses often looked more like nurses traveling through the sky than the polished airline representatives people recognize today. But the idea behind the scarf was already close to aviation. A piece of cloth around the neck had always been useful, visible, and easy to identify. It could soften a strict uniform without making it look casual. It could add color without changing the whole outfit. It could make a person look finished, even in a small cabin where passengers noticed every movement. As airlines expanded during the 1930s and 1940s, the uniform became more than work clothing. It became part of the flying experience. Cabin crew helped passengers board, checked seatbelts, served meals, calmed nervous travelers, handled motion sickness, and kept order when the aircraft bumped through rough air. Their clothing had to survive long hours, tight aisles, spilled coffee, changing temperatures, and the constant gaze of passengers sitting only a few feet away. After World War II, commercial aviation entered a new phase. Aircraft grew larger, routes stretched farther. More people began to see flying not only as transportation, but as something exciting and modern. Airlines were no longer selling only a seat from one city to another. They were selling confidence, elegance, national pride, and the feeling that stepping into an airplane meant entering a different kind of world. That is when the smallest details began to matter. Hats, gloves, buttons, lapel pins, collar shapes, and scarves all became part of the cabin's visual language. The scarf slowly changed from an old aviation accessory into a controlled design feature. It framed the face. It pulled attention upward. It helped passengers recognize the crew quickly, even when one airline's blouse, jacket, or skirt looked similar to another's. The biggest change arrived with the jet age. In the 1950s and 1960s, airplanes became faster, cabins became more comfortable, and airlines began fighting for attention in a new way. They were no longer competing only through routes, schedules, and ticket prices. They were competing through image. A passenger might forget the exact aircraft, the shape of the meal tray, or the seat number printed on the boarding pass. But they remembered how the crew looked when they stepped through the cabin door. They remembered the smile, the uniform, the colours, the feeling of being welcomed into something polished and carefully managed. This was when flight attendant uniforms became moving advertisements. Airlines hired designers. Uniforms became brighter, sharper, and more expressive. Some looked almost military. Others looked like they came from fashion runways. Some borrowed from national dress. Some leaned into the space-age mood of the time, with clean lines, bold shapes, and colours that made the cabin feel futuristic. The scarf was perfect for this new world. It was small, but it could say a lot. A scarf could carry the airline's colours. It could show a logo, a pattern, a national symbol, or a design that changed with the season. It could refresh a uniform without requiring the airline to replace every jacket, skirt, or blouse. One piece of fabric could make a simple outfit feel instantly complete. Airlines also learned something important about where passengers look. A flight attendant is often seen from the shoulders up, at the boarding door, while leaning into a row, while giving instructions, while checking overhead bins, while speaking from the galley. The scarf sits exactly in that visual zone. It surrounds the voice. It frames the face. It turns the crew member into a recognizable part of the airline's identity. But it was never only about beauty. The scarf also helped create order. And in aviation, order matters. A crew that looks coordinated appears disciplined. A disciplined crew makes passengers feel that the aircraft is being managed by people who know exactly what they are doing. In an emergency, passengers are not looking for decoration. They are looking for the person who clearly belongs to the aircraft. Today, the flight attendant scarf has survived because it does several jobs at the same time. It completes the uniform. It adds brand colour. It keeps the overall look formal without making it feel too stiff. It gives airlines a flexible design detail that can work across different aircraft, different climates, different cultures, and different body types. Not every airline uses scarves in the same way. Some crews wear neck scarves, some wear ties, some wear bows, some airlines use cultural garments or more gender-neutral uniform options. But the scarf remains one of the most recognizable pieces of cabin crew dress because it does more than sit around the neck. Inside an airplane, the cabin air can feel dry and cool, especially during long flights. A scarf can add a little warmth without the weight of another layer. During long duty days, it can also help protect the collar area from makeup, sweat, perfume, and skin oils, keeping the uniform cleaner and sharper through multiple flights. It is a small thing, but cabin crew work in close quarters, and small details matter when a uniform has to look fresh hour after hour. The fabric is usually light enough to be comfortable, but firm enough to hold its shape. And that shape is rarely accidental. Many airlines train their crew to tie scarves in specific ways. The knot, the fold, the angle, and even the position against the collar may all be part of the official uniform standard. What looks effortless to passengers may have been practiced carefully before the crew ever stepped into the airport. There is also a simple design reason the scarf works so well. Aircraft cabins are visually busy. There are overhead bins, seatbacks, safety cards, luggage, screens, carts, lights, blankets, and passengers moving in narrow aisles. In all that visual noise, the crew still has to be easy to find. A scarf creates a bright signal at human height. It quietly tells a passenger, without any announcement, where help is standing. For global airlines, the scarf can also carry a sense of place. A certain colour, a silk pattern, a cream drape, or a traditional motif can turn the uniform into a small symbol of national identity. The aircraft may be crossing oceans, but the crew's uniform reminds passengers which airline is carrying them and often which culture is being represented in the sky. That is why the scarf has lasted. It is practical enough to justify its place, elegant enough to be remembered, and symbolic enough to become part of the airline's face. The most surprising part is that the scarf, one of the smallest pieces of the uniform, is often one of the most carefully controlled. It may have an approved knot, an approved fold, an approved colour, and an approved position against the collar. In some airlines, small differences in scarves can even signal roles, ranks, or service positions. What looks like a soft personal touch may actually be part of a strict visual code planned long before passengers arrive at the gate. They wear them because aviation discovered that a small piece of clothing can do quiet, useful work. A scarf can soften a uniform, sharpen a brand, protect a collar, warm the neck, frame the face, and help passengers recognize the crew in a crowded cabin. It began with wind, oil, and open cockpits, passed through nurses, uniforms, and jet-age glamour, and became one of the smallest but most powerful symbols in the sky.